Gordon Institute, we offer a range of different programs from undergraduate through to professional education. Recently, we launched a redesigned MS in engineering management that leverages the best of our award-winning on-campus and online programs and re-envisaged it into a single top-tier graduate program that prepares leaders for the new world of work and available 100% online. Not only does the Tufts MS-EM deliver the relevant content and practical skills you need to thrive in an increasingly complex and rapidly changing world, but it also provides you with an exceptional part-time graduate experience that can fit into your busy life. Now, the MS in Innovation and Management, it's a full-time accelerated program designed for people who want to make things happen, who are passionate about science, technology, engineering, or math, but who believe new solutions will solve our toughest challenges and make this a better world. If you're a recent STEM graduate who wants to accelerate your career and be at the forefront of developing new ideas, the MSIM, the MS in Innovation and Management program, will provide you with the product innovation, marketing, finance, and leadership skills you need to be a new leader in today's technology-driven world. Just a few words on the format of the event. In a moment, I'll call upon each of the panelists in turn to make about a 3 to 5 minute pitch, either for or against the motion under discussion. Then around 1 o'clock Eastern time, we'll start a discussion among the panelists. We'd also like to include some questions from you, the audience. So there is the Q&A button there. If you'd like to post your questions there, we may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll certainly incorporate as many as we can. By now, firstly, I'd just like to introduce you to the panelists. I'm not going to read all of them have very full biographies, and my colleague Jill will be posting a PDF with all their biographies on there. But very briefly, I'd welcome Han Brown. Now, Han is a dedicated age technologist and AI innovator, and she's dedicated to transforming the aging experience. We have, for the second time, he joined us for our very first keynote debate last year, Bhaskar Chakravarti, who is Dean of Global Business at the Fletcher School here at Tufts, and founding executive director of Fletcher's Institute for Business in the global context. We're also very pleased to be joined by our very own Partha Ghosh, member of faculty for Tufts Gordon Institute. He's a world-renowned thought leader, philosopher, problem solver, futurist, and inspirer in the field of business and technology. Also joining us, a member of Tufts faculty, James Intraligator. James is a professor of the practice and director of strategic innovation in the Department of Mechanical Engineering in the School of Engineering here at Tufts University. And also joining us, we're very fortunate to have Laurie Mazur. Now, Laurie is an architect and visionary with a career in higher education spanning 3 decades. She has planning, design, and operations at some of New York City's leading academic institutions, including New York University and City University of New York. Panelists, welcome to all of you. If I can invite you now to turn on your cameras. Panelists, if I can remind you that we have an informed audience, but they're not necessarily a specialist audience in AI and ChatGPT. So if there is anything that you think is an industry term or a concept that might be somewhat difficult to grasp, if you're not a specialist, please do explain it. So first of all, if I could call upon you, Han Brown, if you could start us with your sort of circa 3 to 5 minute discussion on the topic.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me to be here. Well, I think ChatGPT represents significant leap in artificial intelligence. Now, despite some current limitations, it underscores the technological advancements, particularly in the realm of language, machine language understanding. Well, imagine a world where machines not only understand our language, but also generate text similar to a human. So I think it's an exciting prospect that is closer than what we might think, and thanks to the advancement of ChatGPT. So I also think that it offers a glimpse into the boundless potential of AI in the creative industry, which means the text generated by this model is very coherent, creative, and surprisingly very human-like. And it also demonstrates the vast capabilities of AI, but also it symbolizes this progressive pursuit of technological advancements. Now, from a business perspective, well, I think it holds the potential to disrupt traditional operations. Let's say applications and customer service. It can provide accurate, fast responses and offer support round the clock, significantly enhancing customer experience. So that's, that's a lot of savings, especially nowadays that we're shortage on staff. Now, its aptitude for generating text suggests transformative impact on content creation. So for writers, they could leverage this technology to generate ideas, draft initial versions, or even produce ready to publish articles. So I think it's very exciting. Now, it also has a potential to democratize AI, making it accessible to a much wider audience. So whether it's automating tasks to increasing productivity or facilitating more personalized learning experiences, I think ChatGPT is a beacon of the kind of societal adaptation that's required as we progress technologically. So as far as the future, I think ChatGPT not as the end product, but more like a foundation stone for more advanced AI systems yet to come. So it's exciting. And I also look forward to how the technology underpinning ChatGPT could be employed in other AI applications and paving the way even more innovative tools. So I'm using it daily, learning, growing, innovating, and every day is a new day because I feel whatever I thought I knew last week, it's already has changed. So I'm excited for this technology and much more to come.
Thanks for getting us started, Han. And next up, Bhaskar, can I invite you to speak to the topic?
Yeah, thank you, Will. Thank you to you and all your colleagues for inviting us for this very timely conversation. And I'm hoping to learn a lot from my fellow panelists, fellow debaters here. And Han, thank you for kicking us off. Though I noted that you did not vote on either side of the proposition as to whether ChatGPT is overhyped and overestimated or underhyped or underestimated. So let me sort of put my stake in the ground, which is I believe it's overhyped and underestimated. So that's my way of hedging my answer. And of course, ChatGPT is going to have lots of implications for for people, for jobs, for institutions, for universities like the one we are sitting in right now. It'll have an impact on many occupations. Already, just today, McKinsey, Partha, and my former employers, old employers, put out a big report which says that thanks to generative AI and other forms of automation, we'll have an additional $4.4 trillion of global GDP annually, years to come, and worker productivity might go up by 3.3%, a stunning 3.3% growth annually. Just given where we are in terms of worker productivity, that's quite a leap. And McKinsey is not alone. Other redoubtable analysts such as Goldman Sachs has a widely circulated report which pretty much says similar things. Maybe the numbers are a little bit different. They talk about 300 million jobs affected, $7 trillion impact on global GDP. 7 trillion, 4.4 trillion, we're talking about trillions. We're talking about very large numbers, big numbers and big names. So here are kind of, I would say, 5 things for us to keep an eye out for. And so I'll describe these 5 things in terms of 5 gaps that we need to traverse. The first gap is what I would call the Yogi Berra gap. Allegedly, Yogi Berra, who said many things on the internet, which apparently he didn't say, but no one else seems to be claiming this, but he said that it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. So now we think about making predictions about what ChatGPT and generative AI and large language models are going to do in the future. Every time we tried to make predictions in the past about the impact of technology on productivity and the economy, every single time we have been wrong. Every single time we have been wrong. Let me say that again. Every single time we have been wrong. So if I may make a prediction today, and I'm going to stand with my prediction, it is that whatever we predict right now, we are going to be wrong. So let's keep that in mind. Second is what I would call the zero-sum gap. The zero-sum nature has to do with the inputs that are required to actually grow and build future generations of generative AI. And those inputs are talent, which are in short supply. Of course, the Gordon Institute is doing a phenomenal job of turning out great talent, but we need many, many thousands of more Gordon Institutes to turn out the kind of talent that's needed for scalable applications or use of AI. Second is data. Of course, we're generating tons and tons of data, but the data needs to be accessible. The data needs to be useful, and so on and so forth. Third, we need money. Fourth, we need regulations and governance and oversight and ethical reviews and so on. So all these resources are in short supply. So when generative AI starts sucking up all these resources, as they have been in the last few months, it means those resources are taken away from other applications of AI, such as applications in healthcare, such as applications in crisis response, such as applications in industrial operations. And there's only a limited amount of the stuff to go around. So my second concern is that our obsession with ChatGPT and generative AI is actually going to harm AI innovation overall, because limited resources are going to be funneled only in one narrow area, as opposed to broader applications and potentially societally more meaningful applications of AI. The third has to do with the trust gap. We are already seeing lots and lots of concerns, open letters, and so on and so forth by luminaries jumping up and down, kind of saying, hey, we got to stop this thing, we got to regulate, we got to call a 6-month halt. So a lot of concern about trust in what we have unleashed, and not only trust in terms of what will these machines do when they get out of control, but also trust in the information that's being delivered as a response to the prompts that we put in. Already we know that these algorithms, they hallucinate, they can give us information that is not entirely reliable, and we know that this is going to improve over time. But there are many aspects of the generative AI system that could potentially get much worse. We just had, Donald Trump once again showing up on the front pages of the newspapers yesterday. Just imagine generative AI, what that's going to do to the flow of disinformation that's going to already began yesterday and go all the way to 2024. I shudder to think of what our trust gap is how big it's going to be. The fourth is the competitiveness gap. Just given the amount of computational power that's needed for simple prompts, it means that the entire investment in ChatGPT and generative AI is going to be limited to very few companies. Very few companies will be able to afford the kinds of computation that is needed to really sort of, keep this going. And of course, all of that is going to improve. There's going to be a modified version of Moore's law that's going to apply, but still, this is going to be the domain of a handful of companies, which means that competitiveness in this space is going to be challenging. And governments are playing a very limited role in terms of advancing generative AI and AI more broadly. They're pretty much offloading this to the private sector, which is an area of concern. And the fifth area that I'm concerned about is the environmental gap. The amount of energy that's needed, even for responding to a simple prompt, is enormous. In fact, the computational energy that was needed for AI language models was in January alone, January of this year, it was equivalent to the energy use of 175,000 people. So this is an expensive proposition. Of course, that expense is also going to go down over time. But what that means is we're going to be adding to the climate challenges that we currently face and taking energy away from other uses. So with that, all those caveats, I feel we are underestimating generative AI and overhyping it. Thank you.
Overhyping and underestimating. Thanks, thanks, Bhaskar. Partha, can we come to you? You're muted, Partha.
Yeah. No, I want to first thank Bhaskar and Han for laying out a beautiful backdrop. Indeed, as both of you have summarized, there's not really much to add, except I think it is indeed underestimated. I do not know about the hype, depending upon which quarters you go. Some places overhyped, some places underhyped. So I would not take a position on hyping, but definitely take a position on estimating. Who knows what is the new future that we are going to build. So what I was thinking of taking a step back a little bit and try to put it in the context of last million years of development. And I think it's important that when we are in a points of inflection, we understand what is the nature of inflection that we have to deal with, and are we prepared to deal with the transformational nature of inflection. Now, when you take a historic view, firstly, you must realize that the evolution of artificial intelligence has happened over time. If you go back to ancient scriptures, how the knowledge was structured, the strings, the layers, was based on a certain kind of logic. And that is the logic which has enabled the evolution of AI as we know today. Of course, it is very different. It is transformational in nature. So when you look at AI, it's both of a product of transformation as well as evolution. And that's where first is different. The second thing we have to keep in mind, from the Stone Age to computer age to the digital age to social media age to the Trump age, as Bhaskar was talking about, the tools that we have developed has been passive in nature. The tools did what we wanted them to do, but with generative GPT, and I think the term GPT is very important, generative pre-trained transformer. It is a very different kind of transformation where the tool itself could be more intelligent than the human. There's a potential, though I debate that it may not be true, but it is a possibility that these neural networks, that when they come together, they will create some kind of intelligent power, which is significantly different from the tools of the past. So that's a very new kind of discontinuity, which we have never shared before. So that leads to the next question. If this is the new power, which is coming to play, which we have never dealt before, but we have dealt with discontinuities in the past, what are the lessons we could draw on? And what are the newness of this fresh power of ChatGPT? That leads to the second point that I like to touch on, which Bhaskar, you touched on. Maybe you talked about the 5 points. I had 10 points, but 10 points, Trevor would get upset with me, so I'll not talk about it. There are a lot of different dimensions we have to think differently. Now, the first point often people raise, what would AI do to society? Any technological advance has generally helped society to move forward. AI would definitely, as Han, you were talking about, help in productivity, customer service, and all the current business model would fundamentally get more efficient, or they will get transformed. Like, I don't think the healthcare in the future would be the kind of healthcare we know today. We will call it human care, where AI would be tracking individuals to keep us healthy as opposed to delivering medicine. But that would be the kind of transformation that we should be prepared for in any industry that we are talking about. And the third kind, which I absolutely agree with both Han and Bhaskar, that the future is unknown. What AI ChatGPT would open up, we don't know. As much as we didn't know when James Watt realized the power of steam. A lot of different things happened. But this one is no longer the power of steam, which is passive. It is intelligent power with a significant possibility. It reminds me of Tagore. Tagore, Bhaskar will realize, I will not say it in Bengali, but Tagore wrote in one place, within the finite, you are the infinite. And I think within the finite definitions of the algorithm, AI could open up the infinite possibilities. Or in another place, Tagore wrote, within the limits, you are unlimited. Shimar Maji Oshim Tumi in Bengali we say, within limited, unlimited. So clearly it is difficult to estimate, so I cannot say whether it's underestimated, overestimated, but clearly it would be a new chapter that will open up, which I see very positively. I'm connected with 4 AI companies, which I sit on the board, and I want to share with you what's going on. One is in the water space, the other one is in the agricultural space, the third is in management consulting space, and the fourth one is in blood analytical space, similar to what Theranos was trying to do. Now, what I see there is the application of AI, which is solving very difficult problems. Water management of the world, evolution of the soil productivity, given the soil is becoming quite tired and fatigued in different parts of the world. And then we are talking about distributed blood analytics, which is similar to Theranos, except this company has a product. In fact, they have got 100 install base. If any one of you want to invest, this company is ready to take off. And the other one is a company called Quantum Logic, which is in management consulting, but they're not looking at management consulting as Bhaskar and I have known in the world of McKinsey and Company. We used to spend 6 months doing diagnostics when I started, which was way before Bhaskar. And these days we do it in 6 days, but in the world of AI, we will do it in 6 seconds. Now, so the world is changing. That would be the transformational nature. Now, the final point I want to make, which fortunately both of you have not touched, so you have given me some space, but that's where I feel the biggest challenge. I think if you look at the development of the human beings, that we have basically helped the development of the left brain, which is logical, which is knows how to process languages, and that's what AI would do for us. So the relative value of the left brain would become slightly challenged, whereas the right brain, which is imaginative, which is intuitive, which is creative, will perhaps become more important. And that's the only way we should be able to harness the power of AI, as well as control the power of AI when it comes to ethics, fake news, misinformation, et cetera, et cetera. So that leads to a very important point that I would like to make for all of us involved in education, that if we continue to educate our students, whether they are in the kindergarten or in the grade 12 or in universities or in higher education, we have to focus not necessarily on the logical development of the left brain, but also develop the creative side of the right brain, which means education system, the corporate development of individuals, the training systems have to be fundamentally different. And I don't know what it should be look like, but I could see that there's the need for more the Albert Einstein, Rabindranath Tagore type of dialogue, where one is a scientist, which is a mathematical in nature, but philosopher, whereas Tagore, who, as you know, is a Nobel Prize, one of the first Nobel Prize winners, was artistic, imaginative, and we have to learn how to blend the two in the education system. So we are indeed at a point of inflection. We have to think new. I will end by one point for particularly youngsters in the webinar, that we would be definitely faced with significant more number of choices. So that's point number one. But these choices, the life cycle of the choices will become shorter because the world will be changing rapidly under the influence of AI. So to be able to make quick bets, which is wider in perspective, would be very important. And then I think I would like to quote and end with a statement of Nelson Mandela, who did make, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fear. We have to be concerned about the fear, as Bhaskar was pointing out about Trump, but we have to learn how to deal with them and put the guardrails. So such possibilities are limited, while the possibilities of limitlessness of human development continues. With that, I would like to thank you very much.
Thank you, Partha. Folks, just a reminder, if you do have questions, I can see some of the questions going into the Q&A. Please do post them there. If I can now ask James, would you like to address the topic? Is ChatGPT overhyped and overrated, or underhyped and underestimated?
Sure. Thanks very much, Will. And thanks to TGI for organizing this great event, and fellow panelists, thanks for coming along. So I guess from my perspective, ChatGPT really is the most powerful tool ever created. If 1,000 years from now, if we're still around, if we look back on human history, I think you'll see in December 2022, there was this sudden acceleration in every aspect of human flourishing, whether it's creativity, productivity, innovation, medicine. There'll be this incredible nonlinear, we're in this period of nonlinear acceleration right now, where partly because ChatGPT is so powerful, and other LLMs and other approaches for machine learning and AI, but I would contend in particular ChatGPT, it really is helping feedback onto itself. So programmers are making better next gen versions of ChatGPT by using ChatGPT. So everything is kind of suddenly non-linearly accelerating. If you haven't been following this kind of on the web and YouTube and the articles, I mean, most of the stuff that appears in newspapers, et cetera, is weeks and weeks out of date. Usually that wouldn't matter, but the speed at which things are happening now is really astounding. There's a lot of issues, of course. I should say, of course. So in my perspective, I think it's ChatGPT is underestimated, and in terms of hyped, I'm not sure. I think it's both overhyped and underhyped. I guess I'd sort of rather it be a little less hyped, so that it doesn't pull in so many other charlatans, misusers, noise generators, etc. But overall, that's my assessment. In terms of sort of philosophical issues, there's tons of them. Right? There's been a lot of written about the things about whether ChatGPT has any kind of understanding and intelligence. Is it just parroting back, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to dig into any of those issues, but I'll say from my perspective, I kind of take a Wittgensteinian approach, and I think that it's generating symbols that are useful for humans to do stuff with. So whether you want to call that intelligence or not, it's definitely helping facilitate further exploration. So I personally would say that yes, it is intelligent. Also, for those who haven't played around with version 4 versus 3.5, it's shocking how much better version 4 is. So it makes me very excited to see where things will go over the next 6 months or a year. Of course, those are the philosophical issues. Then there's the ethical issues, which are huge. In terms of the first question here in our Q&A, in fact, was about cheating and what about kids in school. The whole model of having kids go home and write essays and turning them in, that just won't work anymore. There's no way to catch what is generated by a human or what is generated by ChatGPT. If you're interested in this, there are tons of recipes that you could find online. You get ChatGPT to write it, then you go through Grammarly, and then you go through, there's a couple of ways you can kind of play with the text, and there's no way any algorithm can ever tell whether it was generated by a human or a machine. So that's not so good. I think it's going to really fundamentally change the way we have to educate people in some topics, like English, for instance. I think personally, it's going to be less about the final deliverable and more about documenting your journey through the thought process and your journey by using ChatGPT to explore these interesting spaces. And that'll be kind of more about what maybe English is like. There'll have to be a whole new areas of education will be required, and frantically, in some sense, right? I mean, starting next semester in the fall, there will be tons of essays and student projects that already happen, but that are done purely by ChatGPT. So we need to change the way we think about education, how we think about training people to use this tool. Again, from my perspective, it's the most powerful tool ever created. It can do anything. It can impact any field. It can, of course, also, another ethical issue is around disinformation, like was raised earlier, job displacement. There's lots of things here, longer term impacts, power consumption, copyright issues is another one that we haven't explicitly touched on yet today. All of the training was done on a great deal of material that was copyrighted, for instance, and is it right that it was used? Is it right that it was ingested or digested? From my perspective, personally, I think that it was a crime, and it would be nice to find some way to kind of create, I don't know if it's reparations, that's probably too loaded of a term in this context, but there needs to be some way to make that right. But at the same time, I don't think we should throw out the tool that was built by this, I'll say crime, because the tool is so powerful as a force for good as well. Other issues are around sort of fair work and pay, income inequality, right? So if this is going to become another tech tool that serves to increase further increase income inequality. It could very well do that. People who know how to use it and can use it effectively within business domains will become much wealthier, and others will be left aside. So that's another issue that we need to think about. And of course, there's huge impacts and issues from a social justice perspective. So those are sort of the concerns. And from my perspective, I think that it's a fabulous tool that can really help anyone do anything they want to do better. So if you're a surgeon, it can make you a better surgeon. If you're a musician, it'll make you a better musician. If you're an engineer, you'll be a better engineer. Anything you want to do, it can help you do better within reason, right? I mean, if you want to be a bodybuilder, it can, well, actually it can. It can give you wonderful workout plans and health plans and eating plans. In terms of, I'll just say a few words on kind of how I think of ChatGPT. You often hear people complaining about how it hallucinates and it just makes things up, etc. From my perspective, that's part of the beauty of it, in a sense. And as long as you understand that, you can actually leverage that and use it to your own advantage. So, as a professor of human factors engineering, part of what my field looks at is how people, what mental model they have as they interact with a piece of technology. And I think that OpenAI has done sort of a disservice to the world by putting a search-like front-end interface on it. As users, we tend to see a search box and think, oh, search engine, and we just go about doing search. And it's really nothing like a search engine. It's unfortunate that they did that, because it really misled many people who then judged it inaccurately as, oh, it's not a very good search engine. Well, it never was. The way I think of it is, it's really sort of I have my own little mental model that it's a text generating glider, a transversal glider that lets you fly through trillion-dimensional spaces and explore those spaces. It's sort of a what if engine, a how might we possibility explorer kind of engine. And the key to using it well is really understanding that it's not a search engine, it's a glider, and putting it at the right point in space, aiming it in the right direction, and having it glide. And so you can do all kinds of stuff if you think of it that way. Again, just a couple of points and examples. So one thing, if you have used it, you probably already have bumped into the idea that it's much better to ask for multiple answers. So give me 7 ways I might design a new product for this toy company. I designed a bunch of products in the last couple months using ChatGPT. Can you identify ways that this product could be sold to our customers? Tell me about our customers. ChatGPT knows all about, let's say, the particular customers of a company. It'll tell you about the customers. You can say, give me 7 clusters of customers, name each cluster, give me a description of each customer group. It'll do that. You can then say, okay, I want to sell my products to some of those customer groups. I want to hold an event somewhere in Boston. Tell me where I should hold the event, what the event should be like, what day of the week and what time of day the event should happen to maximally target those people. Now it'll do it. It'll do it. It might be making it up. But if you look at it and if you consider, you never would just copy and paste. You sort of take what it says and you consider it. Anyway, so that's just one example. I want to just mention a few of the other ways that I've used it myself over the last month or so. So I've been doing things like designing behavior change interventions to reduce cancer rates. It's fabulous at doing that. I've been designing a new course for kids to teach them cybersecurity. It's done fabulous work at that. First outlining what kids nowadays know about cybersecurity, what they don't know, where the gaps are. I've been doing new methods for literary criticism, doing some fun work around customer segmentation. Back to the thing about tell me about 8 kinds of students I might have in my class, it'll do it. If I can give a 4-question questionnaire to my students to classify them into different segments, what would those 4 questions be? It'll do it. I had it the other night, write a better ending for the final season of Game of Thrones, or write this final season of Game of Thrones. Much, much better than the one that actually came out. It's not very difficult to get much better than that one anyway. But anyway, engineering, I've been using it to design machine learning algorithms, to write code, to do the machine learning things, to take data and process it in novel ways, harvesting energy from oceans. I've been using it for lots of kind of green economy issues, and also for DEIJ issues. So I've been giving it my courses and saying, how might I incorporate DEIJ themes into this class from an educator perspective? It's been fabulous in helping me identify opportunities for bringing DEIJ issues, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice issues into classes, songs, poetry. It's been doing kind of everything you can imagine. Again, from my perspective, it can really help anyone do anything better as long as they understand it's not a search engine and they can kind of fly it in the right ways.
All right. Thank you, James. Laurie, if I can call upon you. Is ChatGPT overhyped and overrated, or underhyped and underestimated?
Absolutely. Again, thank you for inviting me. And I come here to join this esteemed panel as the street artist among you. I have for 36 weeks been using generative AI, starting with Midjourney, a application for image generation. And so by the time ChatGPT came out, I had really been experimenting in a very vernacular way about what this technology means for how we engage humans and machines without a computer science background, but really thinking about it from the perspective of how do we balance chaos and control. And I think this is potentially the most brilliant aspect of generative systems, as opposed to discriminative systems, which are the kinds of technologies that we've been accustomed to and that we actually feel quite comfortable with, and that allow us to kind of proceed with digital Taylorism, which is kind of the underlying mechanism of automation and moving things from human processes to machine processes. And I think we've seen what some of the downfalls are there. But what I wonder, and why I think the technology is underrated, is if we could actually embrace chaos as humans. I think that we are going to see that this is going to be one of the greatest challenges of our time. It both excites us and scares us to the very core. And I want to use that analogy that you talked about when you said hallucination, and this idea that we need to be able to harness something or control it or bring it into a set of social norms. I think that this is actually one of the fundamental problems with our misunderstanding of creativity and the way that we train children and ourselves. In many ways, I think children are born with infinite amounts of creativity. And I'll use an example in my own life of going over to a neighbor's house at the age of 5. And I told a story. I don't even know what the story was, but I came home and the neighbor told my parents about the story and accused me of lying. Now at 5, I didn't know that what I was telling wasn't true. My boundary between imagination and reality didn't quite exist yet. And I think this is where we found the very first samples of generative AI. And as I've watched it evolve over this very short period of time, I've seen us try to put it in a box, to try and get it to perform for us, to behave the way that we ask children to behave. And so I think we're in a very important moment where it hasn't quite jumped the shark yet. And we have an opportunity to have a really critical conversation about how we embrace chaos. And there's a really interesting factor that's called temperature in any AI system. It's chaos when you're talking about image generation, and it's temperature when you're talking about text generation. And it has to do with how much randomness we allow in the prediction of the next word. So for example, a low temperature setting, if you say I love, will always generate the word you, because you is the most popular word that's used after I love. But if you allow that temperature setting to be relaxed, if you dial it up to 1, it might say I love chocolate, or I love animals, or I love my mother, or I love books, right? And that is where I think we have the potential for innovation. And I think that's actually one of the most important parts about how we can use this for business. So yes, there are certainly ways that we can improve productivity, but I would challenge us to think about how we actually invite chaos and how we use that in a way to solve some of our biggest problems.
Thanks, Laurie. And thanks to all the panelists for that first round of some very full and interesting answers. Thanks also to those of you in the audience who've been posting your Q&A questions. I see that James has also typed an answer into some of the questions. And panelists, if you see a question in there that's directed to you, do feel free to type in an answer. The first question I'm going to pose, James has touched upon this, Bhaskar Partha, and Laurie have all touched upon it as well. In terms of education, James was talking about hallucinations. I was at webinar a few weeks ago with the librarians from the Tisch Library, and they said that they have students coming in now with references that have been suggested by ChatGPT that are themselves entirely fictitious. There's questions on education have come in from Laurelie, and this will address your question, hopefully, and Stacey as well. It's also a question that, since the tool is there, I decided to generate with the help of ChatGPT. So this first ChatGPT, what would we ask you? And here's what it gave us. So, in what ways can ChatGPT transform the educational landscape? And what are the potential benefits and challenges? How might ChatGPT impact the role of teachers and students, for example? And are there any concerns regarding the over-reliance on ChatGPT in the educational settings? Bhaskar, do you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, sure. I think ChatGPT is a tool, like so many tools that we've had in the past. And it is an advanced tool, as many of my colleagues here have pointed out. It allows us to extend our ability to write, our ability to create visuals, our ability to imagine, extends it way beyond what our current capabilities are. So in terms of our impact on education, it definitely will enhance our ability to educate, provided we on the faculties of universities like Tufts and all the other universities, and not just the universities, the school systems and so on, are prepared to embrace this tool and then figure out how do we now enable our students to become better learners and to be able to produce better outcomes of that education in combination with the tool. So I know that there's some questions there which have to do with might this stifle creativity? Might this lead to greater cheating? Might this give students access to false information? The answer is yes to all of that. And it's up to us as educators to anticipate those traps and then guide our students and ourselves to skip over them. So I think the bar has been raised, and it's up to us to try and meet it. It's not going to be easy because the technology keeps moving faster than our ability to comprehend it. But I do believe that over the long haul, it is going to be an accessory to education. It's going to be an accessory to knowledge. I do want to make one comment on the importance of ChatGPT and generative AI relative to AI overall. I feel that in many of our observations, we have been combining those observations. And I do feel it's important to make some distinction between generative AI and other applications of AI. And then when we talk about what are some of the biggest problems that we want to solve for, of course, we would like to solve for problems of getting knowledge, giving people the ability to fix things or write an essay and so on. But we already have several tools that allow us to do that or allow us to educate children to do that. If I think about problems to be solved, one problem that rises to the very top in terms of societal needs, to me, is the application of AI in healthcare. And we've just come out of 3 years of a pandemic where we did not even have the tool to tell whether somebody had COVID or not. You put in a test, and it took 3 weeks at the heart of the pandemic, 3 weeks for a result to come back. There are multiple AI teams that tried to come up with an algorithm that could catch COVID from the sound of a cough or something like that. Almost all of them, not almost, all of them failed. So I really feel one of the biggest problems to solve for us as a society is to save lives and to improve lives. And my worry is generative AI may be sucking up a lot more resources away from those kinds of applications. So that's also an aspect of education that we need to think about.
Okay, thank you, Bhaskar. Han, some question to you. How might we be able to use generative AI as a tool? How might it transform the educational landscape? What are perhaps some of the challenges that you see?
Well, could I add
Sure.
a point to respond to Bhaskar's very thoughtful points, that I feel the whole relationship between faculty and students have to change. Because the world of AI and the world of generative AI would provide us with the information. The information exchange will happen because of this tool. But both the faculty and the student has to come to the learning space, both as students. The role of the faculty would become guiding the process of managing the knowledge transfer, as opposed to coming as I know it all, you have to learn from me, because that would definitely compromise all the value that generative AI could offer. Whereas the role of the faculty in the future would be to unlock what I think, Laurie, you were talking about, the ability to deal with chaos, fuzziness, imagination, and that is a very different kind of, I would say, teaching process. If you use the word teaching, maybe the word is not teaching. The word is unlocking that inner creativity. So that's a very different kind of guiding system, if I may use the word, as opposed to professorial system, where the professor comes with all the knowledge that he knows and he imparts it on student. That era is over. So if we really want to do justice to the power of AI, justice to humanity, we have to engage these two powers with a very different mindset.
Thank you, Partha. Han, if I could bring you in at this
Sure,
point.
absolutely.
What do you see as perhaps the uses of this tool and perhaps the challenges as well?
Sure. I'd like to echo all that's been said in terms of education and the impact of ChatGPT. One more thing, in terms of, let's say, elementary, middle school, high school, and college, I think it's crucial to have an actual curriculum, a class, ChatGPT for elementary, whatever that, entail, but present it in such a way that kids at that age use it responsibly and not perceive it to be something frowned upon. Because here's the thing, as much as I like to say, social media is bad for kids. And I did when my kids were younger. They're 26, 23, and 21. But that was my exact sentiment. Social media was bad for elementary, middle, and high school kids. Well, that didn't go well, during those years. So I see ChatGPT is going to be integral to our home life, workplace. So I think it's best to package it in such a way that elementary kids can use it wisely, and teachers perhaps even encourage them to learn and grow and not look at it as something frowned upon. So that's one point that I wanted to add. Now, as far as education for older adults, well, I come from the aging sector, so I always want to add a spin how that would impact the aging population. Well, this transformed education, as we mentioned, by providing personalized learning experiences tailored to a student or an older adult's pace and learning style, right? It also enables 24/7 learning, offer immediate responses, and this is very, in my mind, relevant for lifelong learners among the aging population, as they are encouraged to continue their education as we age. So that is one of the key components for thriving in life. Now, I understand there's issues. Over-reliance on AI could lead to a decrease in human interaction and perhaps even risk of widening the digital divide among those who are not tech savvy for some older adults. And I think we should shift towards facilitating learning and using AI as a tool, but not necessarily the primary mode for instruction. Now, for older adults who may have access to human facilitators that can help them who would need access to human facilitators to help them make the most out of AI educational tools. So I think that's really important. The proper training, view it as something integral to your life and innovate, and not something to be frowned upon. Now, recognizing there's guardrails, of course, with everything mentioned here. So that's the 2 points I wanted to add.
Okay, thanks, Han. Laurie, if I can come to you. again, your background is in education. How do you see ChatGPT being utilized within the educational landscape?
Yeah, the aspect of it that I find most interesting is the possibility for inquiry-based learning, right? So being able to self-direct your educational path and having access to a breadth of knowledge. And I think it really plays to the polymath. So I think that we have, up until this point, really as much as we talk about interdisciplinarity in education, we still are very disciplinary. And the truth of the matter is, as you move from education into the work environment, we are extraordinarily focused and specialized. And so all the talk about range in education actually doesn't get applied. And so what I really love thinking about is, what if every person were their own CEO? What if every person could kind of span the breadth from science to math to art? And instead of having to be experts in one area, if we can draw upon this compendium of human knowledge, it doesn't mean that there will not be a place for experts, but I think there's more of a place for people who might be able to cross and span those gaps, which I think is really what starts to help in solving those problems, right? Connecting things that have been disconnected.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm going to take a slightly different direction now. James, I'll come to you, and then Partha, I'll come to you. A couple of questions have appeared in the Q&A so far, talking about the potential for disruption in terms of the employment market and job losses. So the question I have is how might ChatGPT affect the job market and employment opportunities in different sectors? Will it have, for example, a significant impact upon productivity and efficiency in industries, and if so, how? But if we could focus on that sort of job loss, that change in employment, James.
Sure. It's a nice, easy question. Yeah, that's a complicated one. I think there'll be huge changes in the landscape of jobs over the coming couple of years. You know, has happened previously with sort of the information economy, et cetera. Whole new categories of jobs will open up. Already, there are now incredible numbers of opportunities for people who are professional prompt engineers, right? That's now become a whole job category. And I think there'll be many more things like that, people who can effectively use ChatGPT. So there'll be new types of jobs appearing, of course. Many of the older jobs will disappear. So, you know, it's already been happening for the last forever, basically, as automation has been coming around, right? There's no longer almost any need for loan officers, for paralegals, for entire categories of professions are disappearing, have been because of automation and machine learning, language, easy template matching, things like that. This is adding a whole other layer on top of that. There'll be many more jobs that are both threatened, but also accelerated by this, right? So if you're a screenwriter, yes, you should be a little bit afraid. You might be replaced by a ChatGPT model, but more likely what you should be doing is figuring out how to use ChatGPT to become a better screenwriter. If you're a poet, that's awesome. ChatGPT, most of its poetry isn't great, but if you play with it the right ways and you kind of move it in the right spaces, it can write some phenomenal poetry. It hasn't quite brought me to tears, but almost. I mean, it can do incredible things. And so again, if you're a poet, yes, maybe reject it, be a Luddite, write your own poetry, rely on your own creativity. That's awesome. Or embrace it and figure out ways to use it to your advantage. So I think it's going to be a real period of transformative growth, contraction, and mutation. I don't have much more to say than that.
All right. Thanks, James. A period of growth, contraction. Partha, over to you. How do you think ChatGPT might affect the job market and employment opportunities in different sectors?
You know, it will obviously affect dramatically. But again, I would like to draw on history. If you look through the different revolutions that have gone through, the Industrial Revolution, then we talked about the knowledge revolution, now we are into intelligence revolution. So intelligence revolution is different in kind. For the first time, we'll see the knowledge workers, the people like you and me, would be challenged, because much of the work would be done by ChatGPT and different components of AI. So obviously there would be a significant dislocation as to how the knowledge workers will be engaging with society. But that said, I do feel, as we have seen with the first stage industrial revolution, the steam engine, the second stage with electricity, then the laptops, an empty number of new jobs will be created. They will be different in kind. I see 5 different industries being born. Each would be $1 trillion plus, like one where I will call the green earth industry, which would be all about carbon capture, all about renewables, and AI would be the fundamental at the core to sense opportunities and to sense problems. Then the space travel, which would be the second industry, which will develop dramatically powered by AI. The third would be the spiritual machine, which has not been served as yet. We have served our intellectual requirements, physical requirement. In the next 50 years, we will see spiritual engines. So there will be a lot of different jobs be created. But what I worry about, what Laurie, you touched on, that how would these shape the development of human beings? Because all of a sudden, intelligence is all around, which is, we call it artificial, but becoming more and more natural. So how to integrate natural intelligence with artificial intelligence? And AI is also at a very early stage of development. The power of AI in 10 years' time would be not by a few percentages, by different factors would be significantly stronger. So I think the key challenge would be education. And how do we educate, on one side, professional knowledge workers to become more relevant, because as they get displaced with their current jobs, what would be the new jobs? And there'll be hundreds of them. How do we train them fast? And the other side, how do we prepare the young children, the people currently in universities and colleges, to manage the interface between NI, the natural intelligence, and artificial intelligence? So in terms of opportunities, there will be millions of opportunities, but it would require different mindset, different reference points. And as I talked about, even in the education system, the faculty would not be the kind of faculty we have seen in Oxford and Cambridge in the past. They would be faculty which are humble servants, serving to unlock the imagination of students. And that's a different kind of a ball game, which we have to learn.
Thank you, Partha. Laurie, I'll come to you on this topic, and then perhaps we can switch topics in a moment, Bhaskar, and I'll come to you about democracy and participation and the implications of generative AI. But Laurie, what are your thoughts in terms of changes in employment and skills and potentials for job losses?
Well, I think this is going to be a bit of a tug of war, to be honest. And actually, the screenwriting example is a perfect one. And I'm watching that case study in progress. I mean, we have a union that is really, at a point of negotiation, but the core issue is really how much we are going to allow artificial intelligence to play a role in the process. And we haven't had enough time, frankly, for people to experiment with this technology and understand it, to learn it, to absorb it, before we're starting to take a stand. So I think in the United States, we are going to see a real tug of war with unionization. And I think, as we've even seen in academia, unionization has been on the rise. And so there is a lot of protection in that. I think the first jobs to go, we are going to see overseas. And so I think there's going to be a global impact that, frankly, we might see as a benefit initially to American businesses, but that will have a pretty dramatic effect on how the globe engages. And, just the simple choice to use a chatbot instead of to use people who might be in India or in Pakistan it's profound. I think the other labor issue, which we can't overlook, is, this technology is profoundly troubled and very problematic in terms of the way that it's come into being. And the amount of labor that's gone in that was not unionized, that was unprotected, the working conditions of those people, those are things that are well documented. And frankly, those are the harms that we often brush under the rug. But I think we do need to take into serious account. So from my perspective, this is really about thinking about this from a global perspective, rather than through the lens of what's going to benefit American companies and frankly, the stock market.
Thanks, Laurie.
Let me,
Bhaskar.
if I be allowed to add
Sure.
a spin to this from, let's say, a baby boomer point of view. Well, I think obviously at ChatGPT, very powerful. It enhances human capabilities, automate mundane tasks, freeing up for older adults to do more strategic roles. Like we mentioned, customer service. It can tackle on basic inquiries, leaving more complex cases for human intervention. So this could make jobs more appealing for older adults, allowing them to leverage their wisdom and experience in oversight, problem-solving roles. So I think that it will create opportunities as long as folks, older adults, adapt and also have a means to learn and be trained properly.
Thanks, Han. Bhaskar, if I can just change direction slightly. In terms of regulation, in terms of politics, participation, what do you see as the potential risks or benefits that ChatGPT poses to democratic systems and political participation? Are there any regulatory or governance measures? We've talked about guardrails a couple of times now, needed to mitigate the potential political manipulation or indeed you mentioned misinformation earlier around ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's of course a really important question, Will. Let me touch on two things. And one is the need for regulation and oversight. Clearly, there is need for regulation and oversight. The problem is who's going to do the regulation? Because if you have a Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, going to Congress and asking the members of Congress or other policymakers or regulators to regulate him and the industry, he knows fully well, Sam is a very smart man. He knows fully well that none of the people sitting across the table have the ability to regulate a technology that they fundamentally don't understand. So I feel a lot of the AI gurus and AI leaders who are asking regulators to regulate them know fully well that there won't be a follow-through. They're basically covering themselves with plausible deniability, kind of saying, hey, we told you that we are creating a Frankenstein's monster. Regulate us now. And if the monster is unleashed, then it's on you. It's not my fault. So that's one. And we are living through this moment right now, right? Because you think about members of Congress, forget about members of Congress who are, they're much further removed from things like AI and so on than the members who are attending this particular debate. Even we don't understand. I mean, I won't be able to open up the hood and try to figure this out, or I can't speak for my colleagues. This is a technology that is very, very sophisticated, running very far ahead of our ability to create guardrails. So that's an ongoing issue that we need to recognize the fact that we need to take this much more seriously than we currently are. And just signing a letter, an open letter saying, a 6-month hiatus, give me a break. That is just nonsense. That's just being naive. I mean, none of these people are going to take a break. Google's business model is being threatened right now. You think Google's going to take a break? Of course not. Microsoft is going to take a break? Of course not. So these people live in reality. That's one. The second is, what I really worry about is the state of democracy. And the state of democracy, of course, is being unleashed on a daily basis, the attack on democracy being unleashed on a daily basis. And because of the abilities to be creative, ChatGPT can allow us to be much more creative in terms of disinformation. And that's only going to keep going up between now and 2024 rolls around. Now, here is the issue that I think we are not paying sufficient attention to, which is that democracy comes at a cost. And part of the cost is preserving democracy in the United States comes at the cost of democracy in the rest of the world. Here is why. 2024 is a year when we are going to have major elections here in the United States. 2024 is also a year in which India, Indonesia, South Korea, a dozen African countries, at least 7 Latin American countries also have elections. Now put yourself in the place of Facebook, which has just fired tens of thousands of people. Many of them who are in positions of doing content moderation. They've also fired their content moderation outsourcing teams. Limited resources for content moderation at Facebook is all going to be focused on the United States, right? Historically, 90% of Facebook's content moderation was focused on the US, whereas 90% of Facebook's audience was outside the US. Now that disproportionate allocation is only got worse, and the ability of disinformation creation has just magnified because of ChatGPT. So if you're worried about democracy, sadly, we ain't seeing nothing yet. And the problem is when we say we, it's not we in the United States, it's we in India, we in Indonesia, we in South Korea, we in a dozen sub-Saharan African countries where there's nobody who's going to be watching the content that's going to be running rampant in those places. And I really, really worry about the state of democracy, both here and in the rest of the world.
Thanks, Bhaskar. James, can I come to you on this one? And then I'll come to you, Partha. And then I think we'll take a slightly different tack after that. But James, what do you think the implications are for democracy and for political participation?
I don't really think I have anything to add beyond what my colleagues have been saying. I mean, I think there are huge dangers present, the kind of ability to generate misinformation, false text. The other thing that we haven't touched on too much directly is just the ability to write text that really speaks directly to a target audience. So if you really want to have a message that gets to a very specific group of people, either for good, right? So, hey, you should really show up to the polls because otherwise the evil guys will win, whatever it is, that's great. But it could also be, text that is generated to specifically speak to people to make them believe that the election has been delayed by a day, for instance. There's all kinds of ways. And ChatGPT is fabulous at coming up with text that really speaks to and motivates a specific target demographic. So not only will it be creating false information, it'll be creating false information that's even more effective, believable, and targeted for a specific group. So I think that's the other kind of side of it. It's not just going to add noise, it's going to add very targeted, strategically defined kind of viruses that it can put out, that people can use to put out and influence elections and really undermine democratic processes in many different ways. So yeah, that is terrifying.
Thanks, James. Partha?
I will take a little bit of a different view just to enable a debate, because after all, it's a debate. On one side, I agree with both of you that indeed democracy is being challenged, and rightly so, I would say, because many ways you could say, has democracy delivered? Bhaskar, you talked about India. India has been a democratic country for the last 75 years. But when I look at the performance of India, whether I think in terms of pollution, corruption, nutrition, GDP per capita, and compare that with other countries in the neighboring areas, which are not democratic, and India has not done well. It's true. Similarly, if you look at the United States, it is true that the gap between the rich and poor has increased. There are a lot of angry people, for whatever be the reason. So here is a new force that we have been exposed to, which is the power of AI. So the question to ask would be how the ChatGPT or the power of AI could be used to create a governance process of nations, governance process of the world, which is keeping up with the technology as opposed to worried about the technology, which means maybe there's another kind of crazy. In autocracy we lived through. Before that, there were the kings and emperors. Democracy is relatively new. We have experimented with democracy, as Churchill used to say, in absence of any other process, this is the worst of all, could be the best of all. So now the question is, could we also be innovative, use the power of intelligence, both natural and artificial, to create new governance processes, new ways of people who could participate, which could be democracy +1 or democracy 2.0 or some other name which we don't know. So I would not get locked up that because of AI, because of ChatGPT, the democracy is challenged. Of course it is challenged, but then we have to be innovative enough to embrace this power to create the next S-curve of management of nations, management of society, management of the global governance. Because you could also see, this is my favorite subject, by the way, I can go on for 3 hours, but I would like to make another point. We have created United Nations after the Second World War. We created the League of Nations after the First World War. Both of them have not delivered. We have more wars today. Look at what's going on in the middle of Europe. Let's look at the Korean Peninsula, look at what's going on in the South China Sea, what's the Rohingya crisis, and multiple problems in Africa and Latin America. So what has the United Nations delivered in the name of democracy? Very little. So I think time has come to use and embrace this power to create a new humanity, a new civilization that the world could celebrate, where every child, the 8 billion people, could participate in development of a civilization where everyone enjoys the minimum dignity, gracefulness that the world deserves. And that would need a different kind of governance, not the democracy, which has partly worked, but largely did not work. And we have to be honest about it.
Thank you, Partha. We're going to take a slightly different tack now, and I'll come to you, Han, first, and then to you, Laurie, if I may. We talked about some of the disruption. We talked about the potential for job losses. So those in the audience now thinking, well, how is this going to impact me, and how can I prepare? What do you think in terms of individuals and organizations? How can they prepare for this disruption? Are there any specific skills or areas of expertise that are going to become increasingly more valuable in a world where ChatGPT is more widely utilized? How can people prepare, reskill, retrain? Han?
Well, the folks, let's say, who's calling in, I'm guessing you're college age. My advice is keep learning, creating, and innovating. Take courses. I know Google has offered some free courses. There are courses on Coursera that's run by Ng, I believe. That's the last name. He came out of Google. There's abundance of some free education, ranging from some basic understanding to very deep understanding of machine learning, Python, and have an open mind. And of course, in learning, proceed with caution. And I would say, because let's say you're college age, you have the whole world ahead of you. And this is just one out of many learnings ahead, whether it's, life lessons, experiences outside of your school, in your workplace, and then future family life. This is one out of many learnings ahead. And I would embrace it, but proceed with caution.
Thanks, Han. Laurie?
Yes, so I pivoted my career to make this what I do for a living. So I am a little biased in this way. I train people to learn generative AI, and I train them in the same way that you would learn how to play the guitar, or play a musical instrument, or learn how to paint, which is it's very hands-on. I don't think this is an intellectual pursuit, and I don't think it's one that we are going to do by watching online videos. I think this is one we do in community. And actually, I think the greatest opportunity post-pandemic is for us to join learning communities and use the tools and pick one. Ignore the overload of what I call AI junk food. Pick one foundational model, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard, or if you want an image generator, it really doesn't matter. What you're learning is exactly what I've been talking about with this balance between control and chaos. You're learning how to communicate effectively with a machine, and you're also seeing its flaws. And I think that is what's worth having a conversation about, right? So I think pick one, experiment, do it in community, get yourself trained and educated, and then we can have a more meaningful conversation at an academic level about what this means.
Thanks, Laurie. James? Reskilling, retooling, how do we do it?
I think that it's something that needs to be done throughout the educational system. It should be that we are teaching kindergartners how to ask better questions, how to understand, how to frame a question so that someone answers. I mean, a lot of these are skills that are skills in any case, not just ones relevant to ChatGPT and LLMs, right? Framing the right question. There's been lots of quotes about how that's the most important part, is coming up with the right question. And in ChatGPT, LLM world, that's even more important than anywhere else, figuring out what you really want to know, mapping out a path to get from where you are to where you want to go, looking for opportunities to explore the broader landscape, etc. Those are sort of the skills that we should be teaching, maybe not kindergarten, but at the very latest, I would say middle schoolers should be learning that, and in parallel, learning how to use it responsibly, right? How to go about using it to generate better answers, better responses, better knowledge, thinking about the implications from a DEIJ, broader social cultural perspective. All of those are topics that we should be teaching them to engage with and think about, and even using ChatGPT to kind of investigate. I mean, I think that if you're interested in issues like DEIJ issues, let's say social justice issues, etc., you can easily ask ChatGPT to start investigating those issues with you. And I've found that I've learned so much by walking through fields of knowledge, kind of half led, half leading. It's kind of a collaborative exploration with ChatGPT. And I think that is kind of the skill and the approach that we need to be taking in education, that we need to teach people how to use it that way, how to use it responsibly. I'll just go back to something I had mentioned earlier. So if let's say you're in high school and you have to write a AP English essay and it's due Friday, etc., it's very easy for kids now to just go to ChatGPT and have it write the essay. And you could ask it to make it a little bit dumbed down so it doesn't sound like it was written by ChatGPT. You can ask it to include particular themes. That's pretty good, but make it 10% shorter. Can you make it 20% shorter and sound a little bit more written at a slightly lower linguistic sophistication level? You could do all of those things and end up with a wonderful final artifact. But I think both the training and the assessment should actually start to ask to see that path that you took. And part of what you'll be assessed on is not the final deliverable, but more the journey you took to assemble that final deliverable. It's like more like an artist's assessment, a critique session where you want to, you don't want to just see the final industrial designed product. You want to see all of the sketches that led up to it and all the explorations. Which textures did you explore? Which colors? How did you look at them, etc.? And I think with ChatGPT as your sort of partner on that exploration, you can really go very far, but you should also be documenting that path. And that's how maybe you'll be assessed. But again, I'm not really sure.
Thanks, James. Arthur?
Oh, this is $1 million question. I see it, there are two sides to it. One, the how to skill and reskill people who would be serving, I would call the entire AI universe. And obviously, that's where people have to learn about how to manage ChatGPT. But the other side, I feel, it's not a question of reskilling, but all of a sudden you have got this intelligence with which you can converse comes into play. It's like when the electricity came into play, everyone did not learn about electricity and how to make the bulb or how to work in the power stations. But with the light came new ways of thinking. People can work 24/7, they can work in the night. Similarly, when the intelligence have come into play, I think the education has to focus on how to use this new power for the betterment of society. And then comes the question, education of whom? Are we talking about the top 10% of the people in the world, or are we talking about the bottom 80%? I look at the people at the bottom of the 80%, bottom 80%, people in the small villages in Africa, in India, in Brazil, in Indonesia. And fortunately, through my Boston Pledge activities, I see the intelligence there, except they don't have the access. So how could education be modified using the power of ChatGPT so that you can converse in the local language, not in English? But the other thing that we have done to the world, we have lost a lot of the great languages because everyone has to learn English to belong. ChatGPT gives you the power to speak in your mother tongue. If you are a village in Chile, you speak in the local Chilean language, you talk to someone in Bangladesh in Bengali, but the cloud would do the translation for you. So that's the kind of education that we could bring to play, where we do not have to go to Davos, which is the top 5% of the population of the 1% that goes. But when people could begin to conference with each other, when they're in the ground, in a village, in a field, and exchange best practices in their own mother tongue, that would open up a new world. And that's the kind of education that we have to bring to play. So the question is education for whom? And education for the bottom 80%. If that could be reformed, reimagined using the power of ChatGPT, then we have done service to the world. And that's, by the way, one of my other companies I'm involved with, InCube, is working on. So it's possible, it's happening. And I think that's where the world could go.
Thank you, Partha. So we just have 7 minutes remaining, and I'd like to pose this question to all of you. Han, I think it was you who started us off by saying that, that this is the start of maybe even greater developments in technology, which kind of reminded me of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when they invent the computer Deep Thought, and when they ask it about life, the meaning, life, the earth, the meaning, and everything, and it says, well, actually, that's the computer that comes next that I will invent, will actually help you answer that. So Han, help us look to the horizon here. What is next? What is coming next? What should we be watching in terms of what the future trends have in store for us?
Well, as you know, some of the technologies that we are seeing, some are still in beta, right? And even when beta, it is amazing. For instance, Wolfram plugins in ChatGPT, amazing. Science, technology, engineering, and also runway ML, amazing, right? So what should we look ahead? Well, consider where we are right now with some recent development. And even when it's only in beta, I think it's almost like the sky is the limit. So I'm really excited to engage in these tools and technologies in all regards. I'm learning Hugging Face, Python, Wolfram, AutoGPT. So the key here is keep learning. Because it's evolving so fast. So that would be my take on what's ahead of us, is that we in order to keep up, we really need to be learning every day.
Thanks, Han. Pascal, what's on the horizon for us?
Yeah, in the spirit of learning, one thing I've learned is it's a mug's game trying to predict the future, right? So I won't even step in there. What I would say perhaps is what I would like to see in the future. And what I would like to see is generative AI actually having some byproducts, not necessarily in generating, new visuals or new essays and so on. I think that's all very, very useful and relevant material. What I'd like to see is all the innovations that are going to go into the creation of future generations of GPT and the work that very smart people are going to be involved in, the harnessing of data, the thinking around creating ethical guardrails and frameworks, not just relating to generative AI, but AI more broadly. I'm hoping that it has a spillover effect in other applications of AI. And I would say, just to kind of go back to, might be sounding like a broken drum, I think AI's biggest application is in saving human life. And so far, it's done a terrible job, but its potential is enormous. So even before generative AI hit the headlines in the end of 2022, in the mid-stage or early parts of 2022, another landmark development happened in AI when AlphaFold basically developed the ability to predict the structure of every protein in the human body. Now, what that means is it could potentially open the door to massive amounts of revolutions in drug discovery, vaccine discovery, new forms of treatment. So I'm really hoping that the future is one where the spillover of all the talent and effort and capital that's going into generative AI can actually help us deliver better outcomes in AI, in healthcare, AI in saving human life, whether it's in health or crisis response, or to a variety of other ways in which this kind of technology could be put to use.
Thanks, Pascal. James, what should we be looking at on the horizon?
Well, it like they all said, it's very hard to make any predictions. When I first started playing around with ChatGPT back in December, I was thinking, oh man, a year from now they're going to have things that can do X, Y, or Z. And within 3 weeks, they had things that can do X, Y, or Z. And I thought, wow, okay, in like 6 months they'll have something that can do A, B, C. And then within 2 weeks, ABC was happening. I mean, the speed of the speed of growth here is just kind of scary. Actually, it really is. I mean, I can't even imagine what things will be like 6 months from now. The ability to generate video, generate music. I mean, all of these things are happening. Generate agents that generate other agents to take care of complex tasks. You can spawn sub agents. I mean, it's crazy. One thing I've just been thinking about recently is the idea that maybe this should be thought of as a public utility. Maybe it should be provided free of charge. Maybe the government should just eminent domain take over OpenAI and offer it up as a free service available to everyone. That it should be seen like water or air or food. It should be a human right to have access to ChatGPT. It is incredibly empowering to have that access, and to not have it is incredibly disempowering. It puts you at a real disadvantage. From a social justice perspective, I think that's a huge issue. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Thanks, James. We've got just 2 minutes left. So Partha and Laurie, if I could have your headline thoughts on what is next.
Let Laurie go first, and Partha will finish with whatever time is left.
I will add that the dirty little word, the metaverse, is not going away. And in fact, I think what we are going to see with AI and what we are already seeing in the signals from those things that are in beta is that synthetic reality will be in our hands in a very short period of time. And the moment at which my 15-year-old daughter can use natural language to envision a space that she wants to invite her friends to come over, and using, whatever version of AR versus VR we are at, this is the moment that we're going to move from this post-truth world into a realm of possibility, and and the matrix will be a reality. So we have a lot to deal with beyond just AI.
Thanks, Laurie. Partha, 1 minute.
So I think it has been all kind of touched on. The world would be different because of ChatGPT, because of AI. We're clearly scratching the surface, more to come. Given what more to come, as Bhaskar and all of you touched on, we cannot really bet on what that more might be. But what we could definitely bet on, that the choices and the options in front of us will exponentially increase. That's point number one. Some of them will open up new possibilities, some of them will create problems. That's for sure. We talked about democracy. We do not know how the democracy will evolve, but democratization of knowledge will happen. So that gives me hope that, as Bhaskar, you were talking about, that we will be able to bring a new equation for the development of humanity. And that's very important, because fortunately, I've been exposed to $100 per capita environment to $200,000 per capita environment. And it is shameful that we can make those environments coexist today. We have to solve that problem. So in that spirit, the point that I would like to make for the younger people, the choices are many. Life cycle of choices will be shrinking, because that's where we have to be extremely fast. We have to be knowing how to engage with opportunities, because as they shrink. And most important would be if AI could do the logical work, the mathematical work, the Cartesian work, could we unlock through the education system the imaginative power of society, the imaginative power of individuals, which is the right brain, and in the process, create a new world that each one of us could be proud of. So I think that's what I would like to emphasize, that we have an opportunity to serve humanity better, and we should work with it. And of course, I would not use the word guardrails, but be concerned citizens to be able to avoid the unintended consequences. The term unintended consequences is too frequently used. Oh, we experimented, but unintended. We cannot afford that, because anything unintended in the world of AI would be extremely dangerous, which we cannot afford. So we have to take a holistic view as to how we engage with the world of ChatGPT, the world of AI, and in the process create a better world that we are proud of.
Thank you, Partha. And that just takes us just after 2 o'clock. So thank you very much to all of the panelists for coming and talking to this very topical issue. You brought a range of different perspectives, and it was a highly insightful and interesting discussion. It really was. Bhaskar Chakravarti, thank you to you. Han Brown, thank you to you. James Intriligator, thank you. Partho Ghosh and Laurie Mazur, thank you to all of you for freely giving of your time today. Thanks also to those of you who came and attended this keynote debate. We'll be taking a break over the summer, but we'll be back in the fall term with a different topic to look at. We are going to take note of some of the questions. We tried to amalgamate some of those questions. Some of those questions were answered on live, but we may well make a post in which we answer each of those questions. But please enjoy the rest of your day. Travel safely. Thanks very much for coming today. Goodbye.